with Wednesday. She needed to be set apart from the others, kind of a rebellious look, but she still has a power. They don't look like she's wearing someone else's clothes. She owns them. I really love her uniform. Wednesday's fabric was hand screened, so the stripes had different shades and variations. So it wasn't such a hard black and gray stripe. We talked about what colors she was going to be surrounded by. And Tim really liked the purple and black stripe. He felt like it was very Poe-like in a sense. And then on the skirts, I tweaked the stripes. So when you move, you got a variation of tonality.
Howdy, roomie.
Wednesday, this is Enid Sinclair.
Are you feeling okay? You look a little pale.
Wednesday always looks half dead.
The one thing I didn't want to do with Enid is with all the light colors and stuff is get it too girly or cat-like with the claws and all. So I decided to use a lot of graphic patterns. So even though it was colors, they weren't super pastel and they had angles and aggression to their pattern that balanced with Wednesday's costumes.
OMG. I love the look.
That dress, I played around with different ideas, but I kept going back to look at vintage stuff. And then I was randomly walking down Bond Street in London and looked in the Elias store and I saw this dress. And I was like, whoa, this is kind of the perfect Wednesday dress for that party. And I bought it and recut it for Jenna. And then we tie-dyed it a little bit more than the original so it wouldn't just be solid black. And then we had to duplicate it because we needed like 5 of them. And then ahead of time, we didn't know the choreography at all. She just came up with that, which was pretty phenomenal.
Darling, how long do you intend on giving us the cold shoulder?
Lurch, please remind my parents that I'm no longer speaking to them.
With all of them, I took into mind the original character. With Morticia, I did a little insert of a silver and black material in the dress so it wouldn't totally go flat black on camera. And then Catherine and I played around with the neckline just to give the neckline Morticia enough, but was the best Catherine neckline. With Gomez, Tim really wanted that basic stripe. And what we did, because he's got such a round body, we did a lot of darts in the suit to keep the stripes going vertical so they didn't start tweaking and go around his body. And I had a lot of fun with Pugsley's sweater because they didn't want just another killer bee sweater. So we did uneven raw stripes and I had a great knitter that was able to actually knit it and make it work, which was a very hard thing to do.
Is this a bad time? I'm Miss Thornhill, your dorm mom.
Because she was an odd plant lady, we figured she shopped the local resale stores. And with Weems, Hitchcock was my inspiration for her, like the bird. So we went off that super chic 50s, early 60s silhouette, and we just had to play with that with her hair, her accessories, and we created her character that way. And she also helps so much in the way she moves in a costume. And she's a real collaborator that way. She has such stature. To put those kind of clothes on somebody like that was fun to do. And she had a great time with it.
We always wanted everything to feel very physical, not digital. It certainly was above and beyond what you would normally do in a TV show. That was always our approach. Do it the best way, not doing it the cheap way. When you talk about the general look of the show, you have to start with, it's got to be Burton-esque. If we had a creature effect, it has to integrate into Tim's vision of the show. We never wanted to do things that were over the top or so flashy that they drew attention to themselves. A good example is Nevermore. It was about 20% an actual building. The rest was CG. We had to make sure that it never felt like CG. It always had to feel like it could have been shot in the 70s.
I knew it. Hello, thing.
What surprised me, I think, most of all, was trying to just figure out how to get Thing to do what he needs to do. Because he's an actor's hand, but there's this rather tall, large man attached to it wearing a blue suit. Where do you put him? Do you need to cut a hole in the floor? Do you need to cut a hole in the desk? That was a process, and just working with Victor to figure out what he can do, because Tim Burton was very specific about Thing. He's subject to the laws of physics. He can't float. He can't really jump. And so that was a great learning experience to base everything in reality.
Tim cared a lot about the hide. For him, nobody had ever done a hide before. It's a new creature, and he was very particular about how it looked, how it behaved. That's really where the focus of our creature development was. The creature was supposed to embody teenage angst. We made his neutral position full-on rage. That creature started angry and just kept getting more angry. The creature fight in the forest, we wanted to feel as much like conventional filmmaking as possible. So we went down the road of working with the stunt department to get the shape and choreography of the fight. This would be our guide to the sequence. We were going to paint out the stunties and replace them with CG creatures. So it was really a great way to do it. It saved us a lot of time and I think gave us a much more realistic result than if we had just done the whole thing in CG.
The Crackstone Wednesday fight, it had to be bigger, so it felt like more of a finale than the monster fight. So maintaining that intense pace, one on top of another, it creates a need for a bigger and bigger spectacle. There was a challenge there because we had to use a 3D Crackstone for some of it because you couldn't blow up the interior of the Nevermore quad with an actor there. Wednesday's final finale with Thornhill. One of the biggest challenges we had there was to get a 3D creature to interact with a live person. And so it was really Tim Burton again who had the idea to have the bees form a blanket on Thornhill that perfectly tracked as she writhed around on the ground. But of course, it was very satisfying to have the former Wednesday of Christina Ricci trying to kill the new Wednesday of Jenna Ortega. It was very poetic.
The look generated itself almost. Tim steers things in certain directions and the design naturally follows suit. And you find yourself with a Tim Burton set without ever having sat down to design a Tim Burton set. The main building was interesting because we spent a lot of time looking at castles in Romania and we kept looking at Candy Casino. It gave us a really good jumping off point to then extend it and become our own castle. It had the classic American Victorian Gothic roofline with those turrets and the windows, which sort of screen Addams family. We sat down with some key frames of the location and then drew on them to try and get the perfect silhouette that would sell Addams family. We wanted people to look at Nevermore and go, yes, I understand which world we're in.
What the hell did you do to my room? Dividing our room equally. Looks like a rainbow vomited on your side.
Enid, so many items and lights and cushions and throws, and the trick became adding these elements to it in such a way that it didn't just become a mush. Tim was very clear on nothing should be black straight out of a can. He wanted to feel age and patina and history, and even though everything was very minimal and very pared back, that there was a lot of detail to that character. So everything in terms of dressing or in terms of prop pieces was carefully chosen. We started with something that had color or that had vibrance to it, and then we stripped it back in stages and then restained it. So we brought it to a level where we could just see the color that was underneath it, but it still had a Wednesday monochrome look. And the main thing we just kept adding to with practical lights. You have to give them multitudes of options for when they're shooting, particularly with the dorm room where we were going back over and over again, that we could always change the mood. So we could keep it very subdued and pooly light and keep it dark, or we could open it all up and make it vibrant and colorful. And that was important, I think, to keep the space changing through the show as you went through it, so you never quite got bored of it.
Welcome to the quad.
It's a pentagon.
I always wanted the whole academy to feel very eclectic. It is a real mix of styles and they jostle each other for attention. And actually it works very well. We couldn't just tread those traditional worlds. It had to be something slightly more inventive and new that people hadn't necessarily seen before. But when we got to Weems's office, we really had this opportunity to crush all those styles together in one space to reflect the school as a whole. We had this great location, which was very ornate and rococo. So we introduced modernist furniture and brutalist sculptures and taxidermy to give it this eclectic melting pot feel. And then Tim insisted she had a unicorn mug on her desk to show that there's a lot of internal conflict going on with her, which we never saw particularly.
Welcome, Nevermore Academy. Now, on behalf of the entire Jericho community, we are so pleased to have you all here today.
The whole show is about opposites. We wanted Jericho to be the exact opposite of Nevermore, so it's immaculate and bright and colourful. There's no black in there at all. It had to have that contrast. And it needed to be just a little bit too perfect, to the point at which it becomes suspicious. So when we sat down, it was quite a quick pivot to the fact we were going to build the town. But obviously there's a lot of stuff already built into the script. Wednesday has to travel from here to here to here, which was great because then you could design the set exactly as it should be. The drain pipe was exactly in the right point for it to come out of the window and all those things.